right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is the called meeting of the subcommittee studying legal deserts. I'll be filling in for Alan, who couldn't be with us, as Brian said. Before we get too far, let me read the ethics statement, make sure we have that straight. It is the duty of the subcommittee members to avoid conflicts of interest in performing the duties as a member of this subcommittee. Any member of the subcommittee who is aware of any conflicts with respect to matters before this subcommittee should disclose those at the meeting. Are there any conflicts that anybody should make us aware of? All right, seeing none, welcome to everyone. I think we all know each other. We've been doing a lot of these Zoom things the past couple of days, and everybody's reintroducing themselves. But I think everybody knows everybody except our guest, and we will recognize them when it's their turn to speak. First thing we need to do is, in your materials are the December 16th, 2022 minutes. Or does anybody have any reviews, corrections on those? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve said minutes.
So moved.
I have a motion from Tom, second from Jimbo.
Second.
All in favor, signify. Well, without objection, we'll do it that way. Without objection, the minutes are approved. Seeing no objection. Moving right along, we're trying to be very cognizant of everybody's time. So moving right along, we're going to turn things over to Mary Pollard, who is the director of NC Indigent Defense Services. And so, Mary, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks, everybody. I think I've met many of you, or probably most of you, but I'm Mary Pollard. I'm the executive director of the North Carolina Office of Indigent Defense Services. And I understand that you are studying the topic of legal deserts, which is a particular problem for our office. For those of you who aren't familiar with IDS, we are the state agency that is charged with oversight of the state's Indigent Defense Fund and resources. And that means that we are supposed to make sure that everybody in North Carolina who has a constitutional or statutory right to a lawyer, but who is financially unable to afford representation, gets counsel, gets a lawyer. And I think most folks think of us and our mission in relation to criminal defense work, and that is a lot of what we do. But the IDS umbrella is much larger, and it includes juvenile delinquency cases. It includes involuntary commitment. You're entitled to a lawyer if you're involuntarily committed. It includes parent defense cases. If you're a parent and you're in abuse, neglect, and dependency proceedings, or if you're facing a termination of your parental rights, you're entitled to counsel. And that's a significant part of the IDS budget. So it's a big umbrella. The commission, the IDS commission, is charged with recommending the best way to provide these services, and that's great. In reality, it's up to the General Assembly to provide us with the resources and the authorization to do much of what we would like to do and what we need to do. So how do we deliver indigent defense services in North Carolina? It is a patchwork of methods. In 39 counties, soon to be 39 counties, we have a public defender's office, right? That's a state-funded office with a locally selected chief public defender and a staff of lawyers, investigators, and legal assistants who represent clients in that district. Much of what they do is adult criminal work, but most of our offices do at least some work in the other categories I mentioned: some parent defense, civil contempt. I think that's one I didn't mention, involuntary commitment, and the like. So that's 39 counties. And of course, in those counties, because of the high rate of conflicts in these cases, we still rely on private assigned counsel to handle a lot of the work, as low as 15% in some PD districts and as high as 50% in others. So that's how we do it presently. Now we are facing challenges. We hear regularly from judges all over the state and clerks of court and chief public defenders that they can't find sufficient private assigned counsel to represent folks. There's a number of reasons for this. A lot of folks will say, well, it's because of lack of money, and that is a lot of it. We don't pay private assigned counsel nearly what they are worth, in my opinion, and I think in lots of people's opinions. Most of our work is done in district court, and the district court rate of pay is $65 an hour. It was just recently raised to $65 an hour from $55 an hour. And as recently as 2011, it was $75 an hour, but the commission had to cut rates significantly in 2011 because of the state financial crisis, and we've never been able to recover. Somebody did an inflation calculator, and if you were being paid $75 an hour in 2002, which a lot of lawyers were in district court, that would be $102 an hour today. So that's a pretty big dent in that number. And to be sure, that is a reason that we've seen attrition in the private assigned counsel rosters, significant attrition. And I don't think that's the only reason, right? We have, I'm not sure how to share my screen here, but the reality is that the ranks of people who have handled private assigned counsel work for the last many years tend to be older. They tend to be leaving the profession. They tend to be retiring. Our research director took a look at the average date of bar admission for private assigned counsel in some of our most problematic areas. And it was 1993, right? So that's the average year of bar admission. So a lot of those folks were admitted earlier and are probably looking at retirement in the near future. You all know, I don't need to tell you because I got these numbers from Brian Oaten, that half the lawyers in the state live in 2 counties, and that 63% of the lawyers in the state live in 5 counties. But we need lawyers in 100 counties. And that's increasingly problematic. The IDS research staff looked at where IDS was having the greatest difficulty filling or finding lawyers. And they basically looked at where we're having to pay lawyers to travel in from out of district. And our attorney deserts looked a lot like the deserts on Brian Oaten's slide that I've cribbed from his presentation in July. It's a little bit worse. The mountain areas are screaming red for us, the far west part of the county, and then the District 9, 7A, 7B, kind of the eastern part of the state, a real shortage of private assigned counsel. So the solution that that the commission has approved is that we try to expand the reach of the public defender system throughout the state. And I don't think it's a magic bullet solution for a lot of reasons, but we do think it would help. So we've proposed a 6-year plan where by the end of the 2027 fiscal biennium, right, every district in the state that needed a public defender office would have one. And we proposed kind of a phased rollout where we do 8 to 10 districts a year over that 6 years. But we can't do that without specific legislative authorization for each district and without a little bit more money from the legislature, because as you can imagine, with paying district court work at $65 an hour, the reality is it would cost a little bit more to have public defenders everywhere. Now, if we were paying lawyers even $75 an hour, we'd be looking at break even or a savings for public defender offices. The concept or the solution of a public defender office was actually recommended a few years back by Chief Justice Martin's Commission on the Administration of Law and Justice in North Carolina. And I think that while the attorney crisis has accelerated since that commission did its work in 2015 and 2016, I think the folks who were studying indigent defense as part of that commission saw the crisis coming on. And that commission, which was a blue ribbon panel, it was made up of lawyers and judges and district attorneys and community members and law enforcement and folks from the voluntary bar associations and from the state bar, did a thorough deep dive into indigent defense, and they concluded that the institutional public defender office was positive for lots of reasons. People who study these things conclude that a public defender's office, a good public defender's office, offers consistent, good quality representation. With private assigned counsel, you get some great representation, but it tends to be more uneven, particularly as people's caseloads get stretched way too thin. The public defender's office has the ability to specialize in different areas of the law. They have in-house investigators. They have, there's supervision, there's training, there's mentorship over young attorneys who do the work. So it's a good model. It works well for the most part where we have it. And we really do think that we need them everywhere. Is it a magic bullet? No. First of all, we're going to have to recruit people to staff the offices. And that's going to be a challenge. As probably most of you know, some of our district attorneys are having trouble staffing their offices in some areas of the state. And I anticipate, the public defenders are going to have the same issues, but we are aligned with the Conference of District Attorneys in our belief and request that these lawyers who are working for the state need to be well paid and well compensated, and that will help us attract good quality staff to those offices. I think that for folks who have a heart for doing public defense, and a lot of young lawyers do coming out of law school, the prospect of a job with a salary and health benefits and not having to worry about the administration of the office can entice some folks to live in workplaces that they know they couldn't go and hang out a shingle and make a living in. So that's what we're hoping to do. We've made our pitch to the legislature. We have proposed 8 new districts for wave 1. The bad news is I think we're going to get some of what we asked for, but it's always hard getting the money that we need. And we're in the IDS as part of the Justice and Public Safety Appropriations budget. And that's a bucket of money that has to be allocated among all these really important entities, right? It's IDS, but it's the courts, it's the district attorney's offices, it's the attorney general's office, it's the highway patrol, it's the Department of Public Safety. So we're all kind of in this one bucket of money, and they try to make it stretch as far as it can. So I don't know where we're going to end up in this year's budget. I feel optimistic we're going to make some progress, but probably not as much as we need. So that is my pitch. I am happy to take any questions or hear any ideas from you or any concerns.
Thank you, Mary. I want to ask a question first before we recognize other folks. A question that has come up, or a comment that has come up when establishing public defender's offices in these counties. I have been told, I can't say I can put my finger on exactly where it may be, but since the county pays for the housing of the DA's office, the county would also pay for the housing of the public defender's office. And of course, they must be equal. I have heard in a couple of rural counties some feedback. I don't want to call it pushback, but some feedback of, we have a hard enough time housing the DA's office. How in the world are we going to house an equivalent PD's office? What's your comment to that?
Well, it is true that the counties are supposed to provide the office space. The state IDS pays for the computers and the phones and all of that part of it, but the actual real estate is provided by the county. The public defender office, like the footprint, probably wouldn't be as big as most DA's offices, only because when we cost them out, right, we anticipate that a quarter of the work or so is going to be handled by outside counsel. So the staff might be slightly smaller. And there's no requirement that, well, we would like the office to be, close to the jail and the courthouse. They don't need to be in the courthouse. And, it is an expense for the county. I think in the big picture, it's a benefit for the county and folks who talk to, a couple of our strongest supporters in the General Assembly are former sheriffs who saw kind of how the before and after of how the PD system worked in their county. And all of a sudden their jail population dropped, right? Because people were getting out pretrial if they could. And if they couldn't, the cases were moving faster through the system. So while it is an expense for the county, it's also a positive for their communities. And a well-run, efficient court system is a real benefit. And that's, yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that answer. Does anybody else have any questions from Mary?
I think I'll add just in terms of the size of the office might be smaller than the district attorney's office, but the salaries and the allotments or the allocations for the offices have always been the same by statute, right? The chief public defender is paid the same as the elected district attorney. The statutory minimum salary is the same for an APD and an assistant district attorney. And that's always been apples to apples. So.
And you may have mentioned, but did you, I think I heard you say you're targeting 8 counties or 8 districts rather for PD's office. Can you tell us which districts I should say are those?
So we've looked at let me describe the counties because judicial district versus district court district versus prosecutorial district. So it's Brunswick County, Alamance County, Alexander and Iredell counties, 30, which is the mountains, right? It's all 7 mountain counties. We combined those. So I think that, yeah. And then 6 and 7. So that's our initial ask. Yeah. I've been out and talked to the bar everywhere except for Randolph. We're working on that. And people are pretty receptive. One of in addition to the money, the thing we hear most from PAC about why they can't do the work anymore is just that the caseloads are crushing them. And they feel like they can't do a good job, and they don't want to do it. So presumably the opening of the PD office would be a safety valve, and private assigned counsel could maybe get back on the list, take some cases, and not be crushed the way they are in a pure roster county. So.
And I was just going to add real quickly, Mary, all of your materials are in the agenda. So anybody that wants to look along, I know as far as, the PowerPoint that you had a lot of good information in there. So I want to encourage everybody to take a look at the materials in the agenda for kind of the substance of those slides. I was going to ask Mary, one of the things that we've talked about here, we've talked to different folks from the law school communities and so forth, and trying to attract lawyers to these different communities. You all are working with the DA's office, but I know you said that even the DA's offices are having a hard time attracting new talent. How has loan forgiveness or the opportunity for loan forgiveness factored in as far as, and I know it might be kind of anecdotal at this point, of just kind of understanding whether folks are willing to apply for a job at the DA's office, public defender's office? Is that a major factor? Is that something that's attracting folks? Is it enough, essentially?
So our public defenders are entitled to loan forgiveness. One of the things that we've done, we have recently gotten an IELTS grant for a recruitment and training person to help us get into the law schools and figure out how to attract folks, how to message it. I think loan forgiveness is obviously very, very appealing for either an APD or an ADA. I'm not sure to the extent which we can market that as a definite thing. I don't know enough about it. It seems kind of, if everything works out the way it should happen, right? But you hear so much about how the things change, and I don't know. But I as I understand it now, it's a good option and a good opportunity, and I hope will continue to be for folks doing this work. We have, I don't know how any of it has worked out, but there's a number of private assistant counsel who have reached out to us recently and asked us if we could provide them with sort of documentation of the amount of indigent defense work that they've done, because we have folks in some counties who, it's 98% of their practice. So we've sent them, kind of a summary of what we've paid them and for how many hours over the past many years. And they were going to make the case that they were in fact doing public service, which I think they are, right? If they're working on behalf of poor folks in their community at $65 an hour, I think that's something that I hope that the loan forgiveness folks would take into account. But I haven't heard if anybody's been successful with that.
Mary, this is Catherine Asaro from NC Leaf. Hi. And I just want to tell you, so we do on the state level for our loan for repayment, those people are part of our program, because I completely agree with you.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. And I would love to sit and talk to you about this. We have people who maybe we could partner with the going to the law schools and talking about that kind of stuff. So I would love that. We
would love that as soon as this person's on board and we've been interviewing great candidates. I really, we've got to go in and we've got to get them young. And yeah, I know they're there. They just don't know about the opportunities. So
did I make a couple comments? It's Richard Doughton. I am now a retired emergency judge, but Mary, you just made your presentation to the 23rd Judicial District just a few weeks ago. And I'd like to say that I'm one of the few judges that has held Superior Court in all 100 counties. And from my perspective, the counties that have the public defender office are doing a lot better job than the ones who don't. And our district, I think, really needs a public defender system. I've been practicing law now, it'll be 52 years in August or September, whenever I was sworn in, either a judge or a lawyer. And that's primarily been in a rural area. It's where I practiced law before I became a Superior Court judge, and then I held court all over the state. The practice of law has changed substantially. In rural areas, when I started, and up to the time I became a judge in 1997, most law firms and lawyers in these rural areas handled all kinds of criminal cases, appointed cases. Today, rural areas have changed the way metropolitan areas have changed. You've got lawyers in these rural areas that are not handling all kinds of cases. The general practice of law is almost non-existent anymore. And you've got lawyers in rural areas who are now specializing in real estate, wills, businesses, other things, but they're not doing the criminal work. As a result, the lawyers who handle it in these areas are becoming fewer and fewer. A few years ago, we had a sting operation in Ashe County, which is one of our counties. I'm in Allegheny. But there was about between 20 and 30 arrests of different people. Ashe County had to get lawyers from Asheville to Charlotte to Greensboro to Winston-Salem to handle those cases. And that involved travel. It involved all kinds of expenses that would not ordinarily be involved. Now, that's happening in other counties on these drug cases and these sting operations and whatever. I am a big proponent, and I would wish I'd like to have ours in that first wave, to be honest with it. I feel that our senior resident judge would want that as well. But we need it badly up here. Yeah. You've got lawyers in our district that are handling cases in all 4 counties. Well, when you want one of them in one county, they're in another county. And these districts, these rural districts, only have limited court sessions. So if you can't get them out of one county for another county, then it's got to be put off for several months. And it's just as delayed. Plus, they're spread thin too, trying to cover courts in a large geographical area. And some of them are against it because that is their primary source of income. But at the same time, I don't think they'll be hurt because there'll be conflict cases and other things that they can be appointed. I am a big proponent of having an IDS program or a public defender program in every county in this state. And I think our system will run better, and I think it'll be more efficient, better lawyers, better representation, and the public will be better served. And I don't think the lawyers are going to lose any money on it. Look at the attrition of lawyers in the what you sent out in the rural areas, every one of these counties over that period of time. And I can personally attest. I'm also chair of the senior lawyers in this state too. So the old lawyers that I know, a lot of them used to do this work, and of course they don't anymore. But I'm just very proud of what you're trying to do, Mary, and
Thank you.
And I really hope you'll get our district on the list soon. And we appreciate you coming up and making this presentation to the 23rd Judicial District. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much. There's a number of, I mean, the difference between our wave 1 districts and our wave 2 districts is really razor thin in a lot of cases. And then of course, as any of you who have dealt with our legislature know, sometimes you go down there and things just get different, right? So I think that our wave 1 offices might look different than what IDS proposed, and that's okay with me because we need them everywhere. And we'll just say, my concern is that we're not going to be able to get this rolled out fast enough to address some real crisis areas, because it's very bad in some of these districts.
So Mary, is there anything that we individually or as a group can do to help?
Well, I think, to make your voices heard to the folks who represent us in the General Assembly is I think the key thing. I feel like there's pretty broad consensus among all of the judicial stakeholders that I've worked with that this is the direction that they would like to go in. I think there's a little bit of residual pushback from a handful of private attorneys, but as Judge Doughton said, there's still going to be plenty of work. There's still going to be plenty of work. And, and our primary concern here is making sure that people have lawyers and that the courts are able to function, because you need a lawyer on both sides, right? So this is where we need to go. I think it's a resource chase at this point, and that's you can talk up to young law students how great it would be to work in public defense, how many folks they can.
I'd like to make one other comment.
Sure.
Young lawyers don't have the opportunity to try cases like they did when I started 51.5 years ago. And the best place in the world to learn how to try a case is either working for the district attorney's office or the public defender's office.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great way to learn how to try cases. And when you get out of law school, you don't know how to try one. You've got to do it. And I think that would be great for younger members of the bar as well, because of it's a great place to be trained how to do work, I think.
Well, we're going to get to some good law school news, I think, in a little bit from our Energizer bunny known as Jimbo Perry here in just a couple of minutes. He's been out there working, but I agree with Judge Doughton. There's going to be plenty of work. Conflict cases. He mentioned the sting operation. There's going to be conflict. You can only have the PD's office handle so many of those. There's always going to be conflict cases. And as Mary said, I think what you're focusing on, of course, is the criminal side. there's always abuse and neglect. We're having a hard time in my county finding folks to stay on the abuse and neglect in the juvenile list. And that's, you want to get some trial experience. Judge Doughton knows this. You go into that. I had my first client as a juvenile abuse and neglect case probably about 3 hours after I was sworn in. So it's kind of like I kissed mama goodbye and said hello to my client in about a 3-hour time span. So very important there. Any other questions from Mary? Well, Mary, we thank you for your hard work on this. We appreciate all you're doing. You're welcome back anytime to see what we're working on. And I encourage you to stick around. We've got some really good news coming up here.
If you don't mind, I'd like to stick around and hear Jimbo's.
Absolutely, because
thank you. And thank you for having me.
Our next item on the agenda.
Matt, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I see Tom has his hand up. Tom Anglum.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
I just, look, I'm a prosecutor. I've been doing it starting my 30th year. I've seen the evolution of the public defender's office. I think Mary and I have served actually on committees together, and I echo her sentiment. I see the realities of what the judge said will take place, has taken place in our district, and anything we can do to help, we need to be able to do it. Obviously, I'm limited with what I can do, who I can call to help, but that's basically where I sit. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comments before we move on? All right, the next item on our agenda is Jimbo Perry from the Chief Justice's Committee on Professionalism. I have had the distinct pleasure of presenting at a couple of district bar meetings with Jimbo. And with all due respect to Todd Marcy on here, he seems to put the rest of us to shame when he presents. You will see that in a minute, but I was very encouraged to hear some of the efforts that Jimbo especially and the Chief Justice Commission have been working on to try to talk to some of the law schools about coming to areas. So I'm going to be quiet now and introduce Jimbo Perry. Jimbo, if you'll give a little background on who you are, where you come from, and then hit us with everything you've been working on.
Okay. Well, so my name's Jimbo. I'm from Kinston, and I've been a lawyer for 43 years. Had the privilege of practicing Raleigh a little bit, and then privilege of being a federal prosecutor for a while before moving back to Kinston 35 years ago, and have loved small town practice. And Judge Dalton, I've been one of those that has been able to kind of stay a general practitioner, knowing my lane and knowing stuff I can't do, and quickly referring it out, but doing the best I can. As I heard Cecil from down in Salisbury say, and he kind of captured what my heart is when he said, I love to help my clients not only with their cases, but I love to help them with their lives. And it's been just an honor to do that. I have taken a bit of a sabbatical from my practice. I'm still of counsel, but am not actively taking cases right now that involve situations where there's a lot of fighting going on. And it's been a privilege to be with Mel. I have watched Mel work his magic over the last couple of months as I've hung out with him. But when I kind of started doing this at the beginning of the year, I heard that y'all were doing at the state bar and the bar association, and also Mel had taken up this concern of legal deserts. And I'll just kind of give you a little bit of history with it with regards to my involvement. When I heard that, I thought, well, gosh, I want to go talk about legal deserts to law students. So first time I went, it was announced that I was going to talk about legal deserts. Nobody showed up because nobody wanted to hear much about a desert. It doesn't sound like a very appealing place, does it? And working then with Mallory and April from over at Campbell, we decided to try to rebrand it a little bit. And rather than talk about legal deserts, we would talk about a legal oasis in an underserved community. And I am totally convinced that is true after I've spent the last 3 months going around the state, talking with lawyers in big firms and small firms and prosecutors and public defenders and everybody else. It's almost like Bob Warlick said when I heard him speak at Campbell. Bob said, you know, I'm not going to be a salesman. I'm just going to tell you the truth. And he was wanting to share about the great thing about living in a smaller community and doing life in a smaller community, which is primarily where our so-called legal deserts are. A couple examples of it that have captured my imagination a little bit was I was talking to a lawyer in a big firm from a big city, and he was talking about a number of his legal accomplishments, which are great, and we should celebrate those things. But we all know that if our mental health isn't good and we don't have other parts of our life together, we're going to burn out. And anyway, as I was speaking to him, he shared with me that he carves out Friday and Sunday nights to have a meal with his family. Now, small town lawyers work hard, and sometimes we work hard on Sunday nights getting ready for trial, but we've got a little bit more control over our schedules. And then I was talking to Ben Royster up there, up in Mount Pilot area. And as I was talking to him, Ben said, could I interrupt you? He said, it's Thursday afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. I coach my son's basketball team, and it's time for basketball practice. And for me, that really captured why a lot of people really would love living in a smaller community where there are great needs. What I have been doing the last couple of months, I've kind of taken on what Marcy said, and Marcy said, nobody has all the answers, but we each, and I would respond to Robin what you said, what can we do to help? All of us have part of the answer. All of us in our communities have part of the answer. And so what I've done is, as I've gone to different law schools, and I did this yesterday at Central, and I just went and I sat down in the front hall over there, and I just I started just trying to get to know a few students. And then I have asked them, I've only had a chance really to visit so far at Central, Campbell, and Carolina. I haven't been to Elon. I'm scheduled to go there in a few weeks, and then looking forward to being at Wake Forest. But the question that I ask law students is, and I love to ask them, is why did you come to law school? What drew you here in the first place? And most of them, not all, but most of them say, this sounds kind of cheesy, but I wanted to come to law school to help people. And then what happens, and then what I've picked up, and with April's help, I've really seen this. There's no, as I heard Rob over at Carolina Career Placement tell me yesterday, there's no linear path for law students to end up in a small town with a small firm. Because what happens is when they get there, they're already getting emails from Career Placement. It's saying you need to kind of get your resumes together. We're going to have some folks coming in and be interviewing. And the only folks that really have will have resources and time to recruit are those from the larger firms. So it only takes some months for there to, and then with all the social media stuff coming up and the hype that happens with that, for folks to begin to think that really the only place for them to fit in is going to be in a larger firm in a larger town. And then we law firm folks, including myself, we're in survival mode. We've got 5 courtrooms to go into, and we're just doing the very, very best we can to kind of keep it together. Yeah, Mel, come on in. Mel, do you need to go now? Okay. Well, if you're going to go, then I'm in the middle of a legal desert. Sorry about that. That was Mel. He's going to go do another little presentation. But so, and then what happens is so the law students that don't get a job in the big firm in the big city, they kind of take the so-called leftovers and they end up in a smaller community, in a place they don't really want to be in, or at least they think they don't want to be there. And so they go and they show up and they're there for a couple of years. And after a couple of years, they've gotten their trial skills together, whatever, and then they can get picked up by the big firm in the big city and they leave. So not only have these law students gone to a place they didn't really maybe want to go to in the first place, but the law firms feel burnt, and they're not going to go train somebody else for another 2 years to go hire somebody to work with them for just a couple of years. So kind of the angle that we've been taking as we have looked at it is we have gone in and asked just this question, which is I think the question we all need to ask ourselves. And that is, what do you really want? Not just, what kind of law do you want to do? Law students, I didn't have any idea what kind of law. I still don't know what kind of law I wanted to do a lot of days. But, law students are thinking, well, what kind of practice do I want to have? Do I want to do civil? Do I want to do criminal? Do I want to do, and that's really not even the best question for them to be asking, I don't think. I think the real question that they need to ask themselves to really be healthy over the long run is, where do I fit and what do I really, really want to do with the law? And in my experience of doing this just for a couple months, with the students saying, I really want to help people. And as we talk through that, and as we talk about the possibility of options and what their dreams and hopes are, I find that there are a lot of law students that want to end up in smaller communities. The other day, I was talking to a law student, and he basically he's $150,000 in debt. He wants to get a job. He doesn't care where the job is, he thinks. But again, once he gets there, he may find it's really not a good fit. Well, this young man, we talked through it, and he eventually kind of said, well, I would like to be in the eastern part of the state, Rocky Mount, Wilson, or maybe even Sanford. But the longer we talked, and the more I got to know him, the more he felt free to really tell me what the truth was. And the truth was, his childcare was in Sanford County. I'm sorry, in Sanford with his in-laws, and he needed to live in Sanford. And so once we kind of got that down, then I could kind of begin to work with him, and we can begin to work with him to try to help him find the right place in Sanford for him to work. So what I want to share is I think there is good news from these law students because why they came to school, but I do think that we've got to do a better job of getting involved with these students early on and helping them understand opportunities. We established a standing committee for kind of through the bar counselors in all 41 districts. As I understand, there are 41 prosecutorial districts, 42, even that goes up to 43 because there's no such thing as a District 19, I don't think. But in the standing committees, we've sent out a survey and asking if folks are in legal deserts or in a legal oasis, would they be willing to hire someone and are interested in hiring? And the response that I've gotten from everybody so far is, I'll only talk to 3Ls if they really want to live here. So what's happened is with the smaller law firms, and that includes where I live. When I moved back home, our biggest firm had 11 people. That firm's down to 3 now. And the reason for it is they've gotten burned a few times. They just don't want to take the risk anymore. But we've got to have a mindset change also as attorneys. And we've got to think about, I think what the state bar is really pushing, the legal deserts, the succession planning, the mentoring. And we've got to think about our profession and wanting to leave our profession better off than it was when we first found it. And this is such a vital part of it. So, again, I'm considering a privilege to go around and visit, and I'm just doing it one at a time. And I know we had some good news over at Campbell this past week with a couple of people. I had somebody yesterday get placed in a small firm in Eastern North Carolina. And so I'm doing it one at a time, and that's kind of the part that I'm doing. But I think you all are the vision casters. This is what my job is. I was told before I took this on for a period of time, if I aim at 2 rabbits, I'll probably miss both of them. And so I'm aiming at this rabbit now to try to help address this problem. And any suggestions that come from this committee or any others, I will run with it, and I will run hard with it. Do I have just a minute? I can share a couple other things real briefly.
Absolutely. The floor is yours.
I'll let y'all ask any questions. The goal that we're aiming for is to try to get folks to move in communities where they live, whether it's a big community or a little. And I believe if we do it well with the law schools, we'll be able to have more and more lawyers will live in smaller communities. But right now we're in a crisis, and that crisis is in a lot of different areas. And Mary, you're addressing a lot of that crisis and are going to be doing it over the next 4 years. But even in those cases, there are going to be conflict. There are going to be conflicts. And so we need to try to figure out a way to try to get, in my opinion, we need to figure out a way to try to do potentially pro bono work or low bono work to try to help also solve this possibly. And let me just share about each of those very briefly. The pro bono thing that we have identified to begin as a beginning point is an abuse and neglect court. And we are identifying or are in the process of identifying, well, we've got a district that's willing to do it, and they will take lawyers from a large firm who would come to a half a day every other month to take conflict cases that they will follow those to the end. Through AOC and through the parent defenders, there's training in place to train those people. And then we'll have mentors on the ground who will be ready to help train them when they come in for their half a day every other month. So now, and I've floated the idea by 6 larger firms. I've gotten positive response from one. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that as a pilot program sometime by the fall to begin that process for pro bono type work. And then real briefly with regards to low bono work, Dean Brinkley has kind of floated the idea. And also I've talked to a few other people who've had the same idea, but they just haven't connected yet, of establishing a low bono firm that would be an older attorney, that would be a senior partner. And then at least the model we're talking about now is to identify a few law students from each of the law schools that would be funded by a grant that Dean Brinkley thinks he's got some possibility of obtaining, and to have those new associates in a larger low bono firm would be assigned to particular districts in which they would actually live in those districts and serve those districts. And then on cases that they're not able to handle because they don't qualify for the list or they need help, the older, more experienced lawyers, it would be the senior partners would be available to travel out and to be able to help them. So those are a couple ideas of 100 ideas that maybe you all have had, but each of us need to do our part and as we really think about how we're going to address this. So thank you for letting me make a presentation and speak briefly, and I'd be happy to try to take any questions.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate the comment that just popped up on the little chat. I think it was from Robin. Yeah, Robin, thank you for that. I mean, this is, she's putting together just a real-time example, to use her words, of what's going on out there. Keep in mind, and I sometimes forget and lose sight of this, we as the state bar, what can this committee and Access to Justice and the state bar as a whole do towards this? We're kind of bound by the rules of Keller and staying in our lane, as Marcy likes to say, but individually we can push some of these ideas with the law schools, and we can push some of these ideas with the legislatures as individuals. So keep those in mind. Does anybody have any questions for Jimbo?
I would just like to thank him. We've had this Legal Desert subcommittee, and then Jimbo, comes on the scene, going 100 miles an hour. We can't keep up with him. He is truly the Energizer Bunny. I'm thinking, why do we have a subcommittee? Why can't we work together? We can collaborate. And so we reached out to Jimbo, meaning the state bar officers did, and told him we'd love to collaborate with him and with all that he's doing. And so Jimbo, you need to let us know how we can help, because you are the one, you're the face, really. You're out there. I mean, he could sell anything. I mean, you should see him at these district bar meetings. I mean, he had him, everybody there just kind of eating out of his hand. It's like, because you're the perfect person at the right time for our state. And we're very, very, very blessed that you've kind of decided to leave aside your practice and your life. And you can tell this is a passion and a calling for him. And so I think the best thing we can do is to help him. As you identify needs, Jimbo, out there that you think that the state bar can work with you on and can help you with, please let us know, because you're the boots on the ground. So
and I want to be the boots on the ground, and I want to take suggestions from you all. I would encourage you, the way that the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time, and little by little, a little can make a lot. And if each of us in our own districts, especially those from smaller districts, if we can identify folks that are at law school and from our communities, or even when you go and you do moot court competition in high school and you meet somebody, I would encourage each of us to follow them and to tell them that we need those young people to come home, and then to be willing to actually offer them a clerkship after a 1L year and a 2L year. Just today I was talking to a young man from Central, and he's looking for an unpaid clerkship, that he just wants some mentoring going on. But we as attorneys have got to make time to do that, because we are pretty overwhelmed in our own little practices, aren't we? But we've got to keep an eye on the big picture and what we're really trying to accomplish. So maybe I would encourage each of us to find a law student or even someone who's in college, and that we'd be really willing to mentor them and to encourage them in their practice and encourage them to consider moving back to their hometowns.
I will just say that, we have two coming this summer. One is high school student that thinks that she wants to go to law school, and she just wants to come and shadow, just wants to be in a firm to see what it's like. And then we've got another one that's a 1L that's coming. Again, no promise to hire anybody, because we have our kind of own little family boutique firm here, but they are just looking for opportunities to see what is it like to be a lawyer. What does that look like? What do you do? Of course, we'll pay them a little something, but you're right. A lot of them really aren't looking for money as much as experience and some guidance from somebody. So yeah, we can all do that.
Jimbo,
Yeah.
You mentioned about Ben Royster, talking to him in Pilot Mountain. I remember trying cases with him in Charlotte when he was head of misdemeanor prosecutions, and I remember talking to him, telling me that his kids, he wanted to spend more time with them, and that he was moving back to Surrey County with his dad and his uncle's firm so he could have a better lifestyle for his kids. And so I think he's done that, and I think he's a perfect example for you.
Yeah, Judge, you planted some good seeds there. So, and the whole community is the beneficiary of that, because it would have been easy for him to stay in Charlotte and have more yoga studios and more Starbucks, but he's found a place he can coach his son's basketball team.
Well, I'm happy for him, and I think the world of all the members of his firm there. They're good guys.
This is Tamika. The comment I wanted to make is the angle of asking folks what it is that they really want to do, because it's been a long time since I've been in law school, but as you said, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I don't know if I even thought about what is the life that I want to lead? How do I want to live? If someone had asked me those things and I had matched that up with what it is that I want to do, it's possible I might have taken a different path. But so I too appreciate the good work and think this is a really good way to do it. We probably need more. I think, so it's interesting in terms of talking to our law schools. we also need to make sure that they are doing that kind of thing too in the career placement office, because you did talk about, you know, as soon as you get into school, you're getting your resume ready for the folks who are coming on campus. And so I hope that we're also working with our law school so that they can ask these questions and can do these things for the students as well, in terms of pointing them in the right direction or pointing them in this direction as well.
Yeah. Well, let me just say that April and Mallory do an amazing job with that at Campbell, and so do the other schools. But it's this just kind of general thing that happens when somebody starts to get a job at the beginning, and you get this momentum and the ball gets rolling. It's hard to stop it and to get the students to take a step back and really realize and remember what brought them to law school in the first place. I would tell you that, you know, and sons that are lawyers, and neither of them have come back to Kinston yet. I'm hoping they will one day. I was away for about 6 or 7 years before I went home, also kind of like Ben Royster. But I was with a lawyer the other day, and he told me, and he's kind of having a change of life, and he said it cost him his first family relationship with his partner, with his wife and his 2 children, to really realize what's most important for him. And that is long-term relationships. And Will Graby at Lawyers Mutual does an amazing job making this point at their seminars. And he actually has been part of our presentations with at some places with panels to make that point. He didn't get to come to Campbell, but he has been at others. And so I think, and with the mental health crisis that we have and substance abuse crisis we have with lawyers, of 30% of us are struggling, you know, with keeping our lives together. And I think it's because for a lot of us, we may be plugged into the wrong place. And so I think this is a mental health and a substance abuse question too that needs to be talked about up front with these law students. If you want to be healthy and you want to live a healthy life, then you need to think about those long-term questions about what really matters.
Just one other point. We've talked about this before, I think, in Legal Deserts. I've been a part of trying to recruit lawyers to Mecklenburg County, right, as compared to, you know, New York or DC. And part of what we do in Mecklenburg County, right, is to try to show them the benefits of why do you want to live in Mecklenburg County. So in addition to having them come and work, right, we, you know, tell them about all the great things and take them with us to, you know, all the great places that we go to in Mecklenburg County. And I think the same is true for small towns. And so I think when these folks do go and work for small towns, it's important that they also see, you know, all that our small towns have to offer and all that the lawyers there do in terms of like being able to coach a basketball team. So I want to make sure that doesn't get lost as well.
Tamika, one of the things, discussion that's come up that's kind of in this of the 100 or 1,000 answers that we're looking for, but one of them has been from one of the law schools, has indicated an interest in helping create what he's called an interactive map that would actually match up potentially the law firm with the student, and it would have that information about the things that are so great about each of these individual communities. And the way he came up with the idea was he loves fishing, and he went to the wildlife, to the North Carolina Wildlife website, and they had an interactive map, and he could kind of say he likes trout fishing. And so it took him to a particular part of the state and all the little streams there. And he said, well, if we can do that with fishing, we certainly could do it with being a lawyer. So if anybody has any ideas for funding about that, how we could come up with funding to do the technology part of an interactive map. I know the Bar Association has a site for helping identify, a job post board, but this would be kind of taking a job post board and putting it on steroids. So.
Yeah, thank you, Jimbo. Any other questions or comments for Jimbo?
Well, I just want to say really quickly, you know, again, I can only speak for Campbell, but if what Jimbo has been able to do with this partnership we've created and the connections that he's made just in the short, maybe 2.5 months that we've started to have these conversations. And he's doing this eventually at all the law schools, across our state. I can't imagine that we're not going to be starting a real, almost legacy of students who want to go and, start their careers and make their lives and create these sense of community just based on what Jimbo is able to translate and communicate to the students, because it is just overwhelmingly powerful to hear him speak and the people that he's bringing to the table to speak to the students. And he is getting our students jobs. And it is unbelievable the impact, again, in this very short period of time that we've started this relationship. So if this is just the beginning, I can't really even imagine what is, going to go down the pipe in the next weeks, months to next few years. And so we're extremely grateful to be part of this conversation.
Yeah, he captivates everybody. Every time he speaks, he just captivates everybody.
Yeah. Matt, let me, the challenge that we did at Campbell, which I thought was really powerful, was this is the 60th year of the Gideon case, Gideon versus Wainwright case. And the challenge we brought was 60 students from Campbell to go into the legal deserts to, in effect, celebrate the 60th anniversary of this case. And anyway, we're having a great time. We're having a great time doing it over there.
Thank you. A couple of things, Brian, you got something?
Oh, sorry, this is Catherine.
Yeah,
Jimbo, I
Catherine,
just wanted to,
absolutely.
sorry. So NC Leaf, we're the loan repayment program in the state, and we administer for Legal Aid of North Carolina too. And we did an article for a national publication about legal deserts and about legal aid attorneys, more about getting them to more rural offices. And I grew up in a small town in Ohio, so I'm a huge fan of smaller towns. But two of the things that they pointed to, and I think I just love hearing all this. One was just the collegiality that you get professionally, that, in a smaller town, that often people will help you in a way that you might not feel as much in a larger area. And that you're just have this community of people professionally. But the other thing that a lot of the attorneys said, and I think this goes to what April's saying and what you're doing now, is that when you're in law school, it's really difficult. And I remember feeling this way too, to get yourself outside of that track of larger law firms that are hiring people 2 years out. And so if you're not part of that, even to take government jobs, it's a little scary. There's so much of that. And I think that the educational piece on that, I know, and it's so much easier to say when you're in our position that it's going to be okay. But it's extremely scary, I think, for a lot of people when you're in school and just facing, I have a job and I know about it. And a lot of the jobs that we're talking about just don't have that timeline. And I think educating people that and again, I remember being there, it's scary, but that it's totally fine and it'll be okay. And a lot of the things that we're talking about. So I just think there is that educational piece is extremely important. So thank you for that.
I agree. Thank you. Kind of tipping my hand a little bit about what's going to happen at the April meeting. We have the folks coming from or speaking via Zoom, via meeting, whatever. The folks from Texas, Texas Opportunity and Justice Incubator. So it's a funding source, as I understand it. And I'm looking forward to hearing their program that may alleviate some of the concerns of the folks in the smaller towns and the smaller firms that, how do we fund this? Well, this incubator program, while we may not be able to mirror it or copy it here in North Carolina, from what I understand, it's a great program. We'll see what they say about it. Brian, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was, I guess as we're talking, I think we've always been focusing on the students and all this kind of stuff. And I remember one of the things that happened in our conversation with the law school representatives was a discussion of maybe the focus should encompass some of the younger lawyers as well, those have been practicing for 5-6 years or whatever. And I'm hearing the stories of, Ben Royster or Jimbo, your story of how you went back to Kinston after a while. And I guess I'm wondering what the cross section is here, like Mary with public defender offices. Do you all typically see recruitment, in the brand new lawyers fresh out of law school, or do you all get folks that are that are, been practicing for a while. And I guess I see the public defender efforts that Mary's doing as perhaps a way to create positions in rural communities that are attractive because there's loan forgiveness, there's steady jobs. And then of course, if you're there for loan forgiveness, perhaps you stay for a long time, you establish roots. But it's just that notion of, I guess maybe I'm kind of posing a question of how do we encompass what we've seen, kind of like the track record of folks that are in the big communities for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's personal relationships, maybe it's mental health, maybe it's just what you feel you want to change. And how do we capitalize on that to really direct folks? Like, do we meet with young lawyer divisions across the state or in the districts? And how do we kind of collaborate our efforts? I guess I was just kind of curious for your thoughts, Jimbo, Mary, on targeting not just the law students, but those that have been practicing for about 5 years.
So our existing PD offices tend to recruit new lawyers and mentor them and raise them up. With the expansion, I anticipate that the new chiefs are going, assuming we get some expansion, what they've done in the past is they'll typically recruit 1 or 2 pretty experienced folks and then start building the ranks. I would like to brag just a tiny bit that the public defenders have the highest retention in the branch, that folks tend to get these jobs and love them. And I've also looked at kind of like, well, where are they hiring from? Are people coming back home to work in the smaller offices, or are they just getting people to move there? And it's a pretty good mix. It's interesting. So there doesn't seem to be a science that I can discern, but yeah.
Brian, I was going to say real fast, I know it's time for us to go, but we, in the district bar meeting that we just did, the presentation in Onslow County, well, that district, there's a gentleman there, probably about my age, a seasoned lawyer who had practiced in a large firm in Raleigh, and he was now wanted to be closer to the coast, and so he was practicing law in Jacksonville, which I found fascinating. So maybe we should reach out to the seniors division. We should reach out to everybody. There may be different reasons why people want to, relocate or to set roots to start with. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you. I know I can't remember how. Brian, what did we set till 3:30 or 3? Maybe over time.
We have till 3:30, but it's always fine to finish when the discussion is done.
Well, let's see if the discussion's done. I see Dion has a question.
Well, I was just thinking, and maybe it's because everything's been so inspiring, but from my end as a pseudo solo practitioner, and wanting to possibly grow or expand and offer opportunities for new lawyers, I have been very afraid of that. I don't know if it's a smart decision. I'm concerned, I'm scared. And I imagine that might be some of the fear that some of the folks in small firms in small towns in these legal deserts have. Is they see an opportunity, they see that services are needed, but they're afraid or they don't know how to go about doing it. So I just didn't know if we could explore any ways to support or templates or any type of networking that could go on that would be helpful to provide the places where these now newly inspired young lawyers, new graduates, 5-year lawyers would go to, because I think that would be something that could help the situation too from that end.
Thank you. I don't, maybe what Jimbo's talking about, maybe the Lawyers Mutual folks can help us out with some of those guiding lights, and let's not forget our friends at the Bar Association. I think they still offer, if you come out, you're a free member of the Bar Association for X number of years. I may be wrong on that, but I think that's still a possibility. So we'll keep them in the loop as well. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, like I said, we have a very full and jam-packed access to justice meeting in April. I think even the chief is planning on being there. Is that right, Marcy? I think he's penciled
Yes.
it.
The last time I spoke with him, he is planning to be there, and I'm not sure if Jimbo, if you know anything any different from that, but don't let him forget.
Well, you're on mute, Jimbo.
You're on mute, Jimbo. Can't hear you.
Jimbo, you're on mute. Okay. Well, he's on mute. He's giving up on it. He must have hit his allotted time. I don't know. Thank you so much. Like I said, we look forward to the meeting. I'm hopeful that we can start moving forward. We do have on the agenda goals for next quarter. Brian, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just briefly, I think at this point, we've tried to explore a lot in terms of the foundation of this subcommittee. Kind of what are we looking at in terms of the reality of our state? What is contributing to it? What is, that's where we talked with law students and talked with some of the efforts that the Office of Rural Health has taken on, IDS and their efforts, really the court-appointed crisis that they're seeing and the solution that's offered by public defenders' offices. I think we were thinking about moving on to, well, what are these other states doing? There are a number of other programs across the country, and we can bring in some of these folks. So unless somebody has a different idea, I wanted to kind of put it out there to see if anybody has any other aspect that they want to explore. But otherwise, I believe the intent is to start reaching out to some of these states. I know I've talked with some folks from Texas and a couple other states, but just to kind of get some folks to join us, talk to us about what they did, what the success has been. You remember South Dakota has a very interesting kind of setup where they've got the bar working with the community and the judicial system. Everybody has buy-in versus some of the law schools like in Georgia and Maine that have specific initiatives to get internships in rural communities. So we want to bring some of these folks in, start talking about what they're doing, what's working, what's not. And then ultimately, we're going to find ourselves in a position of trying to figure out what should we as a subcommittee and ultimately as an Access Justice Committee and a council, what should we do? What should we recommend? But I think we're kind of heading in that direction to try to get some sort of recommendation on paper. But certainly wanted to share that and then also solicit if anybody has anything else that they want to take a look at. Please do. Either you can say it right now or you can shoot me an email and we can talk then.
I think I saw Judge Bell raise her hand. Judge Bell.
Hey, Brian. Thanks, Matt. Brian, and forgive me if I don't think we've quite done this. Jimbo, of course, has gone around to talk to them about the benefits of a small town. We floated the idea about forgiveness. We talked about loan forgiveness in terms of public interest. And this may be just a non-starter, but in my mind, it's worth a shot. Perhaps approaching the law schools about a tiered tuition for people who work in smaller towns. That's approaching it a different way. Instead of forgiving the loan, charge them less if they go to small towns, have some sort of tiered system. Now, state schools, I don't know if that's determined. You have to do it by statute, but certainly Duke and Campbell and Wake, some of the private institutions, we could certainly talk to them about it. And I'm not sure what we'd have to do about the state schools, but just a thought that occurred to me.
I appreciate that. I'll look to, well, I think April just hopped off. She could not stay on. I was going to put her on the spot and say, April, can you commit Campbell to offering tiered tuition to folks? But she probably wouldn't be willing to do that. I think it's, this is the whole thing. We got to be creative here. So I love it. I think we can reach out to some schools and just kind of see what they're looking at. I think money, we've all determined money is a big motivating factor here for these students. And, that's where kind of coming up, I thought it'd be interesting to hear from Mary and her push for public defender offices, because it creates positions in rural communities that might allow folks to invest in the community while also alleviating the mountain of debt that everybody's facing when they come out. But that's only, like Mary's presentation was showing, you're not dealing with thousands of students. you're dealing with a handful of students per county. So I appreciate the feedback, and yeah, we'll continue to try to figure out some different solutions there. And some of these other states, I think, have forgiveness built into their programs, and that's where we might get some more information.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you. And to kind of, I'm gonna rephrase Jimbo. It's a dangerous thought. I'm gonna rephrase Jimbo a little bit. He's asking them, what kind of life do you want? And I think it's our job to say, if this is the life you want, we're going to find a way to help you make a living at doing that life. So I think I think he's just doing great work, and anything we can do to help him. And I think it's a collaborative effort on all our parts. So anybody else with a comment? All right, seeing none, thank y'all so much. We will get together. I don't think we have any other meetings scheduled, Brian, between now and April. We'll meet again in April and then try to come back together after the April meeting. All right. Thank y'all so much.